All right.
Great.
Shall I go ahead and begin?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. This is a conversation about cheating with a panel. And the panel, we have some preset questions for the panel, and then we'll also open it up for questions from the audience. This is part of our fall teaching forum, which is a 2.5-week period of many workshops about teaching, and particularly teaching remotely. This particular session is a collaboration between CEILS and CAT, but it is absolutely open across the whole campus for anyone who wants to join and talk about the issues around cheating in the remote instruction scenario. I want to let our other moderators, Rachel Kennison and Shauna Shaked, introduce themselves first, and in a little bit we'll introduce the participants as well. Go ahead, Rachel and Shauna.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Kennison. I'm the Interim Director for CEILS, the Center for Education, Innovation, and Learning in the Sciences. It's nice to see so many familiar faces this week as we've been having our workshops. It's great to see you here, so thanks for coming.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shauna Shaked at CEILS, a Senior Associate Director. My background's physics, and again, it's wonderful to see you all, and looking forward to this discussion.
I realize I didn't introduce myself. I often do that. I'm Adrienne Levine. I'm a faculty member in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and I'm also the head of the Center for the Advancement of Teaching. And shall we, let's see, shall we do panel introductions now or when we start the first question? Should we go ahead?
Yeah, we could do that now.
Yeah, okay, and then we'll come back to Rachel, to you explaining the difference between this. Okay, so our panelists are, number one, Muriel McClendon. Why don't you give your usual brief.
See, I'm a faculty member in the history department, and I'm also the equity advisor for the Division of Social Sciences.
Thank you, Muriel. And Al Courey.
Hi, I'm, am I muted?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, hi. My name is Al Courey. I'm a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. I'm a biochemist, but I'm also the Associate Dean of Physical Sciences for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Thank you. And Rick Wesel.
Hi, I'm Rick Wesel. I'm a professor in the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department, and I'm also Associate Dean for Academic and Student Affairs in Engineering. Thanks.
Thank you all. And Rachel, why don't you go ahead and explain the purpose of this session and its relationship to tomorrow's?
Sure. So yeah, we really wanted to address some of the common concerns that people have been voicing about academic dishonesty, and particularly in the remote environment. As we've been talking about assessments, what commonly comes up are questions about being able to proctor effectively, but also equitably, and also concerns about students who are honest, but feel anxious about the impact of other students who are not being honest. So those are just some of the issues that keep coming up. And so we wanted to really have a discussion, an open discussion with some leadership and some experts and some also all of you who maybe can share some of your experiences and really have a forum for that. Different from what we're doing tomorrow, which is really a workshop, and it's really to identify and be able to think about different alternative assessments to particularly the proctored exams, so that you can have an array of ways to assess your students effectively and equitably online. And so that's what we'll be doing tomorrow, is focusing on that.
Great, thank you, Rachel. And you're welcome to join that other session if you would like, and it's no longer necessary to register. You can go to the Fall Teaching Forum website and find the Zoom link and attend. Well, let's go ahead to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide?
Donna, I think you have, oh yeah.
Okay, great. So this is just to kind of state the problem that we're faced with, that there are new opportunities for students to be dishonest when they're not physically present in a classroom. And so we'd like to think about how can we decrease the likelihood of students being dishonest, minimize cheating without exacerbating inequities, as Rachel alluded to or referred to, those inequities that are brought on by differential access to technology. Ideally, motivate students to prioritize learning and deprioritize or eliminate cheating, and make sure that our courses are still rigorous given all of these other constraints. So go ahead to the next. All right, so that brings us to our first question for the panelists. What are your observations concerning the attempt, when people have attempted to do the business as usual, use the standard kind of assessments, and perhaps use proctoring software to try to eliminate cheating? And I do not recall, I think this is for Al and Rick. And so I'll just throw this one to Rick, since I see oh, they're both unmuted, but go ahead, Rick.
Okay, well, so the one thing that happened in engineering for when people were replicating kind of the in-class environment, kind of the default was that we're going to take our 3-hour exam that we were going to do in a classroom in Boulter Hall and instead do a 3-hour timed exam that is proctored over Zoom. So there were lots of problems that instructors have seen with this approach. So first of all, there are inequities in people's ability to have a reliable internet connection over the 3 hours. And so that means that for, if you've got a 100-person class, 2 or 3 of them may have trouble with their internet connection and may have to drop off the link. And then in order to give those students a chance to take the exam, then the professor's in a position where they have to give that student the benefit of a doubt, which also means that then the student who wants to cheat can easily say that their internet connection has dropped off. And so right away, and I guess this is kind of like just one example, but the general theme is that there's this tension, between providing equity to the people who need it, who are in a position where they're not on a level playing field. They don't have the same internet connection or their camera's not working, and the person who actually wants to cheat and is bound and determined to cheat. And the thing is that even with the camera, also the sense is that these mechanisms really don't get at, it just gives you a false sense that you're preventing the cheating. So, you're running your exam for 3 hours during Zoom, but then after you give the exam, like Adrian had an experience where, well, I guess I don't know that was during a timed exam, but there are these websites where people can go out onto the web and get someone else normally to help them with their homework, but they're actually having them help them with their exam. So we had several instances in engineering where the full PDF of the exam was posted to these websites like Chug, where people, is that the right word? Anyway, where Chegg, where people are getting help on their homework. So I guess the main themes I'd like to bring out are you tend to run into conflict with, I think I said it. So I'll just close there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rick. And Al, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, Rick already mentioned that just because you're monitoring the students over Zoom, that's not stopping them from cheating. They can, unless you somehow have a way of monitoring what's going on their computer screen, or that's really not stopping them from cheating. And students who are determined to cheat will still cheat. So I really don't think that's accomplishing the desired end. And Rick also mentioned that students don't have equal access to the technology or the internet bandwidth. One thing that maybe Rick didn't mention was that students, probably something like 15% of our students are international students, and our taking these courses in distant time zones. And so is it fair to make students, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to take an exam? These students are paying the same tuition as the students in, well, they're probably paying more tuition than the students in California since they're international students. And this could definitely adversely impact their performance. So I would discourage the use of proctoring software or requiring students to take exams while being monitored through Zoom. I don't think it's effective, and I don't think it's particularly equitable.
Thank you, Al.
How many people know that right now I'm sending a text to my brother? What's the answer to question 3, Mark?
So I just want to interrupt for 1 second, and Shauna is going to be actually there you go, creating an option for you all to pose some questions as you are listening, and then we're going to have one more question for the panelists, and then we'll ask you all your questions. And so in the chat, she also posted a link where you can post your questions.
I just want to make one final kind of summary, which is that we didn't bring up the fact that doing it this way is actually quite difficult. So proctoring the exam through Zoom, even though it doesn't work well in terms of presenting cheating and is inequitable, it's also really hard to, you work really hard to implement this thing that doesn't work very well.
Muriel, do you have anything to add? It wasn't assigned to you, but
I didn't teach in the spring, but I had to give my final exam in the winter over Zoom, and my TAs and I first thought about using proctoring software, and we decided not to. Well, first we were gonna use it or tell them that we were using it, but then not really do it, and so we decided, that would probably be more trouble than it was worth. And so there was one case of academic dishonesty that emerged from that exam, but that was the only one that we could figure out. And so it looked like a lot of trouble for probably not much return.
Thank you. I'll just add that I did use Zoom. I did have my students take the exam over Zoom with their cameras on, and I thought it went pretty smoothly, but I'm not sure how much benefit there was to doing it. So I'm going to be thinking about that for the future. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Rachel and Shauna, I don't know if you, so we put some slides in here that gather some additional comments, but I think that the panelists may have covered most of this. So I don't know, Rachel and Shauna, whether you have anything. Okay, so we can just move on to the next and to the next. Okay, if anyone has questions, as was indicated, please go to this link in the chat. I wasn't paying attention when the instructions were given, so I hope that you understood that. But if you have,
so you can ask a question to the link in the chat, and it'll get submitted, and then we can upvote them, and then when the panelists are done talking, they can address the most popular questions.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so our second question for the panelists is, what factors do you think actually increase students' temptation to cheat, or what motivates students to cheat? And I'm going to ask this one first of Muriel.
Again, as I said, I didn't teach. I only taught one class and one final exam over remotely. But just in general, when I have found students cheating, it's been because they have felt overwhelmed by a variety of things, and they just thought that they were completely unable to complete the assignment. Maybe they were running out of time, or they thought they misunderstood the assignment or something. They just felt that they had, well, that they said that they had no other choice, but they were just overwhelmed by all kinds of other considerations. And I don't think that I've ever found somebody just said, yeah, you caught me, but I was just too lazy to do the work. It was people who were in some sort of distress. That's what I have found.
Thank you. And let's turn this one now to Rick again.
I wanted to make a point about this, kind of the dual of that. which is what is the effect on honest students of the cheating? And I've had this expressed both by students in my own class and just in my role as associate dean. Lots of students have come to my office complaining about the fact that they feel kind of in an unfair playing field as an honest student, that there are other students who are cheating and that the professor is grading on the curve. And so if 10% of the class gets a perfect score through cheating, they might eat up most of the A's, and then honest students just don't have a chance. And I think that this is also related to the sense of why people feel like they have to cheat, even if they're not thinking, if they feel like because other people are cheating or everybody else is so smart that in order to compete, they have to cheat. And we've been talking about this for several years across the campus about how to address this motivation. And the sort of the terminology that we use is norm-based grading, which is a curve, which many people use, which is in order to get an A, you've got to be better than the other people in the class, versus criterion-based grading, which is to get an A, you have to master the material. And it's okay for the whole class to master the material. They can, that doesn't happen. Some people, when I say this, saying, you're saying give everybody an A? No, I'm saying give everybody who perfectly understands the material an A. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you put into place that kind of criterion-based grading, you can disincentivize the honest students from cheating. They don't have to worry about their grade only has to do with them learning the material. And then the more that once you are based in a criterion-based model where you don't have to do better than the other students, you can build a very collaborative classroom where helping each other do well is perfectly fine. You'll just all get better grades, and put in place certain, give them a path to a good grade that doesn't involve cheating at all. They can actually just learn the material instead. So I'll stop talking. Thanks.
I say, this is actually what I say to my students on the first day of every class, because I don't grade on a curve. And so I say, you don't have to look suspiciously around at everybody sitting next to you, that you only have to think about yourself. And I have said explicitly, if everybody in this class gets an A, that's totally fine with me. It's about learning the material. And Alexa, I found some cheating still. Maybe I haven't found as much as I would have had I graded on a curve. But when it does happen and the students come to me, I always fall back on the issue of fairness, and I simply say it's not fair for you to be able to do this and and get a grade that you didn't earn when other students are not. Now, anyway, I always, whenever I find academic dishonesty, it goes straight to the dean of students, and so thank God for them. And so that's why I say it's not fair, and I've never gotten pushback when I say to somebody, it's not fair for you to do this, and others, when other students don't have, you're taking opportunities that other students that have. Everybody is struck mute by that.
Thank you, Muriel. Al, did you have anything to add on this one?
Well, I would just say, students cheat when they don't think that students are motivated to cheat if they don't think there's any chance that they'll get caught. So I think it's important to make clear to the students that you are aware that cheating is something that occurs. You could say that you'll be using like Turnitin, some software to detect plagiarism. You should make sure that the student, that the appropriate passages from the student code of conduct appear about plagiarism and cheating appear in your syllabus, along with the passages that, explain what the penalty is for being caught cheating. So, yeah.
Actually, that's a great point. It matters a lot that the instructor explicitly says that what constitutes cheating in this, what's the appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate for this particular class, and tells the students that they're serious and that they report cases to the dean of students office. That has had a big effect in classes. And if you don't say that, then you can get a large number of students who feel like, well, the professor doesn't care, they're not going to enforce it, everybody else is cheating, so I have to cheat. But if the instructor says, this is a class in which cheating is not permitted, it should be obvious for all classes, but that actually does have a big effect. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that Gaston raised his hand, and I'm going to assume that if he went to the trouble to raise his hand, it's important. So go ahead, Gaston.
Maybe it's a different topic, but plagiarism, I have 3 writing assignments in my course and say 700 students, and I'm working with the Dean of Students, the Office of the Dean of Students for years now. And there is a certain, like underprivileged students are more prone to cheat than students who already learned that for some reason. So, so what I'm doing in my course, the first 2 assignments can be 50%. And then I intervene. I have them explain themselves. And then if the last assignment is also high, then I report them. So I don't just report them right away. Because if I do that with 700 students, every quarter I have like 30 students who I have to report. So I set the whole thing up as a moment where they can learn what plagiarism is. I have a tutorial and a personal intervention. So it's a lot of work, but at the end, they learn how to write and also evaluate other students. It's a peer system. And so what I'm saying, your first submission doesn't have to be perfect because only 50% comes from, of the grade comes from their writing. But they also then can submit a reflection on their writing where they get full points on the writing, even if it's worse writing. And then the other 50% comes by evaluating each other. So with that system, most students get full points on all of the writing assignments. And I don't really send them to the Dean of Students right away, but I will send out, you had 10% or 20%, and I will send out these warnings throughout the quarter.
Thank you. So I think that part of what you said really aligns with what Rick was saying about being very clear about what it means to cheat, and in this case, what is plagiarism, and you do have to learn what plagiarism is. So thank you.
Can I just comment? I would definitely echo what Gaston said, that students, even junior and senior students, don't really always understand what we mean by plagiarism. And so I think the time that Gaston spends educating his students on what we mean by plagiarism, like for example, giving them a free pass the first time they plagiarize, I think that's a good idea because you're giving them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't really understand that this was wrong. But of course, then they're on notice. I mean, I've had students come to me who have been accused by their professor of plagiarism, say like on some final writing assignment, and they said, "Well, it's no different than what I did on the earlier writing assignment," and they didn't say anything was wrong with that. So I think, we need to educate our students on what plagiarism really means.
Thank you. Okay, let's advance to the next. So Rachel and Shauna, was there anything on these, on this point that didn't come up in the panel discussion?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would want to add is sort of the other pieces kind of building off of what Muriel was talking about in terms of the interpersonal and kind of the psychosocial part of learning that students, may feel this sense of imposter syndrome, or they feel like they don't belong, and that they feel this sense of hopelessness to succeed, and that can drive a temptation to cheat, especially if they're focused on the A or the performance being, the outcome being the most important thing as opposed to the process of learning. And the other thing was that feeling that the assessment or the assignment might not be meaningful in some way, if that wasn't communicated, or that they feel anonymous. And that again, speaks to kind of the classroom climate issue, and that, if they're feeling like they don't belong, they have imposter syndrome, and they also feel this sense of anonymity, that may also drive this temptation to cheat. And I also just wanted to comment or just bring up the comment that Beth made in the chat that had to do with, scrolling back here.
The With that, even in a pre-med or pre-law environment,
Yeah.
people will still feel so competitive for the grade that if they're in a criterion-based course, they still might be tempted. Okay, yeah. Rachel, what were you going to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is tough, right? And so there's, what we can control and what we can't control. And I think that just focusing on the way that we can control our own environment and the messaging and our values and our beliefs and the academic honesty that we want our students to have and being able to communicate that, we set the stage, right? And then students are going to behave the way that they're going to behave. And so I think we can speak to how that might affect others and how that might affect the learning environment. But in fact, there are all these other forces that we can't control, right? And the competitiveness.
I feel like when you're describing your cheating policy, you can also provide the context about consequences, both short-term and long-term. So, in a criterion-based class, if someone is trying to get into medical school, you can say it outright that, I'm going to do everything I can to help you learn the material and get an A. But if you cheat, I'm going to report you to the dean of students office and you will never go to medical school. And by the way, one of the things that we're trying to teach you, this is still stuff we're saying to the student. We are trying to teach you how to be the person that you want to be for the rest of your life. And, we're trying to set down a pattern of behavior so that you don't, launch the space shuttle and it blows up, or you don't build a car that ends up costing your car company $2 billion because you're violating the law, and it starts by, behaving honestly in the small stakes environment. So I think that, these are things it's okay to say to the students that we want you not to cheat because it's the right thing to do. And you're setting down patterns that you're going to be, repeating for the rest of your life. Like, what kind of person do you want to be?
Yeah, I think that's really important to express your own values to your students. I think that's a part of the learning process. Okay, so Rachel and Shauna, we're at this moment where we've had 2 questions and we are ready to share some of the audience questions.
Got it. Okay, I will go to the audience question and find the most popular one. The one
Oh, pardon me.
Gesundheit. The one with 2 upvotes at the moment is there a recommendation for dissuading students from using GroupMe or other group chats to share information when an exam is open for a window of time? So I know students are using these for community, so I don't want to dissuade them, but it's a new issue in the COVID era. So basically collaboration during exams when they're not supposed to, if I'm understanding correctly, Jessica.
So I have not had experience with that, but I would ask, is there a way for the instructor to be able to look at all that information, or is it intended to be just for the students to communicate amongst themselves?
The idea for GroupMe is that they'll form it without the instructor being invited. And maybe what you're saying, Adrian, is if you give them enough instructor moderated tools to discuss, they won't be tempted to use GroupMe. I'm not sure.
That's possible. I would just say that, these soft skills, learning to work collaboratively is probably just as important as, learning, the scientific content. And therefore, I think a good approach is to structure your assessments so that, collaboration is a part of what the students are being assessed on, and not just, and so in my department, a lot of faculty have misunderstood when we say we should allow collaboration. Does that mean we should just allow a free-for-all and all the students can work with all the students in a completely unstructured way? Well, no. I mean, the idea is to set up a very structured environment for collaboration, and make it clear that collaboration is a good thing, but that you want to control the way this collaboration happens, so that everybody is accountable and everybody is contributing and people aren't just copying answers off of Chegg.
Yeah, I think there's some really good insights in the chat from Michael saying about creating opportunities for students to collaborate that were within the course structure. He used Campus Wire. And then the students did set up a GroupMe, but it sounds like they didn't do anything on GroupMe that they wouldn't have done more openly. Maybe I'm sugarcoating this, but I think his implication is that because he encouraged collaboration within certain bounds, that the students were respectful and did not misuse their collaborative opportunities. But I think going back to the original question, it is a problem that if there is an opportunity during an exam to collaborate in a way that undermines the intention of the instructor, that is problematic. And so, you know, giving an opportunity, there are scenarios where you can have a collaborative portion of the exam where students are supposed to collaborate, and that will be discussed in tomorrow's workshop. And maybe that sort of diffuses the desire to collaborate in ways that are not allowed. Is there another, do you want to give another question?
Sure, the next most popular question. Can we talk about the Respondus, this is from Jesse. Can we talk about the Respondus lockdown browser and monitor? I have used it several times and find it to be very effective software that absolutely deters cheating. I allow students in different time zones to start at whatever time works for them. So I don't know if anyone wants to
Jonna, is it okay if I just chime in and give a little context to the question? So I've taught now a variety of different kinds of online classes of different sizes, and I've taken various approaches to assessment. For some classes, I've gone with the take-home exam that are all short answer and essay and require real creative thinking. Those also require a huge workload on the grading side to carefully read all of the students' answers. But for large classes, I have a class this fall coming up with 430 students, having some exams with multiple choice and being able to administer those fairly on Respondus. I just feel, I mean, I've thought about a lot of these things. I feel like it's a very optimal solution. It really addresses a lot of the problems because it's such a powerful deterrent. The students can't access any websites. They can't message with people. They can't use their notes. I sort of break a big exam into chunks that are like 45 minutes or an hour, and then students can turn it off, take a break, get a snack, to go to the bathroom, and then they start a new section. And some students find it a little invasive, but for the most part, I haven't gotten many complaints. So I just feel, I know the campus is discouraging, and I feel like that's unfortunate. I feel like it's a really useful, well-designed piece of software. I haven't detected any cheating when people are using it. And all of the exams that I do have the same kind of distribution in terms of means as the ones that we've done in person.
Thank you, Jesse. I think that's really useful to hear that it was working for you. There is a question in the chat, and it had occurred to me as well. Can't the students be using another device to communicate while using Respondus?
Yeah, and I would say no, it's very hard. You would see it because you're seeing from their webcam what they're doing. So if they're trying to use a phone and they look down at the phone, the software would detect that sort of look away events. And it yokes their video response to every individual question. So you can see for the questions that are flagged as potential cheating, you can just quickly go to those and see what the student was doing. Most of the time it's just innocuous, like they're looking at the sky or scratching their head. But if they were using a device, I think you would know.
And did you have any challenges with students who were, whose internet cut out during the middle, or was that a problem, or students in other time zones?
Yes, so there were a few students each time I've used Respondus that had internet problems. I don't know if those were real or made up. The students, of course, can say their browser crashed and then go look everything up in their notes and come back and get the correct answers. But it was only a handful of students out of hundreds who needed me to allow them sort of you allow them, I forget what it's called, but another attempt at the exam, and then they just start where they left off. If they, after doing that, were to change a lot of incorrect answers to correct answers, or suddenly do much better than they were doing, that would be a hint that they were cheating, but I didn't see any evidence for that. students in other time zones could take the exam whenever they wanted. So there was a potential that someone who took it in one time zone could tell a student 12 hours later who was taking it some of the things that they should prepare for, but no one can screenshot any of the questions. It also protects the integrity of the exam because students can't get a copy of the exam and I could reuse those questions again. You can't do a screenshot on it. And so they have to memorize the question and then tell someone at their own disadvantage.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's, you know, there are pros and cons for sure, and I'm glad you had a good experience. There are some concerns about technological, that it makes students have difficulty with technology, and for some students makes them feel really stressed that they're being watched. But it is a tool that is available to the campus. Yes, Tony put in the chat, it doesn't work on Chromebooks. I don't know if that's been, I think that is true. So maybe more details to be worked out if someone's interested in using it. And at this point, Rachel and Shauna, should we go to the next? I think probably for time, we should go to the next panelist question. How can we decrease students' temptation to cheat by the way we teach? And we may have started to get at some of this in the answer to the second question, but I have, let's go to Al first and then Muriel.
Okay, so, you know, I think we can rethink the way we assess students. And so, for example, in the spring, when I was teaching an upper division class that was based on reading and interpreting journal articles, for the final exam, my co-instructor and I each picked 6 journal papers that were relevant to our portions of the class, and then each student was, you know, when they, well, actually the student, we developed a rubric that was a common rubric that the students could use to analyze any paper. And we told that to the students ahead of time, but they didn't know that they didn't see their paper until they launched the exam. And then they had, you know, a generous amount of time to read the paper and analyze the paper according to the rubric. But each student, no 2 students had the same combination of 2 papers. And nobody knew which paper the other students were, you know, any other particular student were evaluating. So it would have been really difficult for them to, you know, find the classmate that had the same same paper as they did. And so that's one approach. In other words, give each student sort of a unique assessment. And another approach is, rather than giving, you know, a single 3-hour final exam, for example, although we are required to give final, I'm not really sure about this. I think we're required to give some kind of final assessment, but basically part of their assessment could be based on a series of short, maybe 20-minute exams. That maybe you could have one each week. You know, in 20 minutes, there's really not enough time to really collaborate. And so I think that would be a good approach. I haven't tried that yet, but I think that would be a good approach. Another thing that's important is to give students lots of practice through lots of formative assessment, reducing their stress, and then hopefully reducing their temptation to cheat.
Thank you. Okay, Muriel, would you like to answer this one?
Sure. Well, I've already started integrating more low stakes assessments in my classes. And so there's no big final exam. I actually experimented with not having a final exam once that did not work out terribly well. But I mean, I had worked with Lee Harris when she was in writing programs, and she pointed out to me, I think very wisely, that it is highly unlikely that in their professional lives, students will be given a timed, a timed writing assignment. And so that the writing assignments that I give, remember, I'm in history, so this will be different. Students would be better off doing sort of shorter, more focused exercises. And that's what I did. It was in a GE course, and they wrote, I think, a half dozen short analytical pieces where they had to take a text, I guess much like what you were doing, Al. They had to take a text and really analyze the text. But when they found out there was no final exam, they stopped coming to class. Or I should say, they never came to class when they looked on the syllabus and saw that there was no final exam. And so I think that was not overly. I mean, some people did, but a lot of people just didn't come to class. I mean, and this was from day one. They looked at the syllabus and saw no final and absented themselves, and that felt really bad for me because I work really hard to put my lectures together. So that kind of sucked. But I am sort of trying to think of what would be an alternative to a 3-hour final exam. Because I mean, I never found that very satisfying for all kinds of reasons, in addition to cheating. And so that's something that I'm going to be working on in the future. But the more frequent, low stakes things, I think, has worked pretty well.
Thanks, Muriel. Rick, did you have anything to add on this one?
Well, when I taught in the spring, I went out of my way to go with low stakes assessments, and I taught, a very mathematical class, information theory, and it was really easy for me to give mathematical midterms and finals. But I went to more project for the midterm. I ended up having them do a project where they put together a variety of concepts, and it was lower stress because they had time to do it. And I felt like the learning was really good because people were able to put the concepts together in a way and reflect on, how all the pieces fit together. For the final exam, I just ran out of time to have them do a second project. And so I had a take-home exam instead of a timed exam. And I felt like it did go pretty well. I think what Muriel was saying, she heard about how, life is not usually a 3-hour timed exam. I think that's certainly true for the students who are going to use the material I was teaching. They would never again need to use the material in a 3-hour timed setting, and that the take-home exam was probably more like sort of my lived experience of how I have to solve problems using the material I was teaching. So I don't think I really lost much. And if you give so there are a couple of other tricks I would like to mention that really help. It just, again, what we're thinking about here is making the payoff of cheating less. In other words, making it harder to cheat and less of a benefit to cheat. And so 2 ways to do that are, if you're gonna, like one thing, I'm gonna teach probability in the fall, and I'm planning on having, I hope I can do it, I was planning on actually having my graders, instead of grading homeworks, help me get this going. That's my secret plan. But to use CCLE to give weekly quizzes where you can randomize the order of the questions and the order of the answers. So is it possible to cheat? Sure. But you've really got to work hard, to say, wait, which one is A, which one is B, which question are you on? And it's just easier to just learn the material, So I was planning on doing that for the quizzes. And then for the final exam, it turns out, you can ask questions in my field where the answer is 6.2, but you can also ask questions where you say, well, explain why you think it's this instead of that. It's easy to cheat when the answer is 6.2. It's really hard to cheat when the answer is explain in your own words why you think the entropy should be larger in this case than this other case, because then they've got to not only collaborate on what the answer is, but then creatively decide how to make their answers sound different enough that they're not cheating. And, again, it's easier to just learn the material. So I think those are things to keep in mind. Sorry, I'll shut up.
No, that was good. Yes, go ahead, Muriel.
In my open debation lecture course, I did do online weekly reading quizzes to get students to read, and it was randomized and all of that, and it was low stakes. It was very few percentage points for the quarter, but they had to do it every week. And at first I was worried, oh my goodness, what if they cheat? What would cheating mean? Maybe talking to each other about the material. I thought, if that's what they're going to do, that is totally fine with me. If they get a couple of points or talking with each other about what's in the reading, that was fine.
Okay.
But I just would echo with what Rick said, that it's a lot of I think my colleagues sometimes, resist the idea of writing, exams where students actually have to write as opposed to just do a calculation, because they know how to write exams that, say, calculate the heat transfer or something like that. But, I think what I've learned is that really a lot of those other kinds of questions, those more open-ended questions, really are a much better test of students' conceptual understanding. Students can calculate the entropy change without understanding what entropy is. But they can't explain, as Rick said, why this process should have a greater entropy change than that process without understanding what entropy is.
Right. So we have 10 minutes remaining, and I want to confer with Rachel and Shauna to see what do you think is most important to address in our remaining time. Should we go over this slide?
I think it'd be good for you to present this paper. Yeah.
Okay. So I found a paper that addressed in what ways instructor practices affect students' temptation or motivation to cheat. And this paper by Day et al., this was from the literature review, so it wasn't only this one paper. And there were two, the studies that they were referring to presented scenarios to students in which they were faced with professors who had different practices in the classroom, and they were asked to assess how much they thought students would cheat in those different scenarios. And so the research showed that more cheating occurs when the classroom culture emphasizes goals that are performance focused, like getting a good grade, rather than mastery focused, that is based on learning. And this comes back to the idea of if the grading is criterion based or mastery based, students are going to be less likely to cheat. And then secondly, when teachers exhibit good pedagogy, so they're well organized, are clear about expectations, then students are less likely to see cheating as acceptable. So what we do in the classroom does affect students' willingness to be dishonest or honest. Okay, Rachel and Shauna, should we head to the next, what do you think should be?
I think we should ask the last question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how can I be sure students are still learning as much if I use these different forms of assessment that are asking them to do, different kinds of tasks than I used in the past? And Al, do you want to start with this one? Or you could say no.
No, I could start. I mean, when I saw that prompt, I thought, well, how did you know they were learning previously? Right. And I think that there's not enough attention paid to learning. And all I would say, what I came up with as a response to this is, you really need to design your course with clearly stated and unambiguous learning objectives. And if your assessments are well aligned with the well-articulated learning objectives, then you should be fine. I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Thank you. Muriel, do you want to tackle this?
Well, in all my classes, I tell my students that I want them to learn something that is interesting and important to them. And since I'm not them, I can't tell them what that is. And so if they can just, if they take something away from the class, that's fine with me. It's going to be different. It's going to be different for all of them. And so, I don't know that I'll be able to know if they're learning as much as they learned before. And like Al, that's right. Who knows what they were learning in, before. But if they learn, I try to keep my expectations modest and achievable. So if they learn something, anything that they consider important, I am a happy camper.
All right, thank you, Muriel. And Rick, did you want to speak to this as well?
Well, my experience in the spring is that because I was trying to come up with ways to address this particular issue of how can I assess the students in a way that's going to be successful remotely, it just caused me to think more about my course. And based on my own sense during the class and what was in the student evaluations, I'm pretty confident that it was a better learning outcome for the students. And I just think that being forced to reflect a little bit more carefully about what you're trying to accomplish, there are many ways to get our students to, master their material, come away knowing that they've mastered it or having that confidence. And chances are that, among all those paths that you can take, just taking the time to find that path, you're going to end up maybe not losing the good stuff that you have and adding some more good stuff to it. Because I think that's one of the silver linings of this, that all of us are being really forced into reevaluating what we're doing. And the fact is, at least in my case, what I was doing before the pandemic wasn't the absolute perfect thing. And by reflecting about it, I was able to be better. And so I think that a lot of times, just by thinking about it, you're going to find out that there are ways to both improve your class and make the assessment more equitable and less prevalent, less susceptible to cheating. Okay, sorry.
Great. So in the remaining few minutes, we have, well, Rachel and Shauna, I don't know if there's time to take one more question from the audience. What do you think?
Well, I see one more question in the Google Slides that just got uploaded twice, so I can share that real quick. I think it's a nice idea. Alan Vasquez asked, would it be okay to tell students, if you feel tempted to cheat, please come to me so I can give you a hint, because I'd rather give you the solution to one problem than let you cheat on the whole assignment, which is just a creative approach.
Very, very creative. Well, what do our panelists think?
Yeah.
I think as long as you give everybody the same favor, I think that's fine. I think that's great.
I always tell students if they're tempted to cheat or they're afraid that they're cheating, that they should come to me and I will make sure that they don't.
Okay. So a great creativity. I think that's really important right now is to think about what we're trying to accomplish and creative ways to accomplish it. There is a last slide, but how do we want to use, we have 5 minutes.
We do have 2 more questions in the Q&A that haven't been answered. Would we want to do those?
Sure.
So one is, in my spring class, we had evidence that students were cheating. Sharing in real time and having a student take the exam early in the window and then share exam content with others were both problems. We didn't challenge the students, but my question for the future is, what can we do to address this? So basically, if there's a window of time.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Do any of our panelists want to take a stab at it?
I think
my goal is to move away from the in-class final exam. I mean, I haven't been able to achieve that yet, but if I ever can manage that, I won't have these problems. But I said I'm far away from that now, so I don't know that I can be much help.
I think that's, again, I guess one way is a series of low stakes exams that are short and randomized. And if you have something that is longer form, that the answer is in their own words so that it's hard for them to cheat without actually having learned the material by the time that they write their response down. Another thing, I mean, things that we do in engineering, we do have faculty members who work with auto graders and so you have a certain type of mathematical problem, but you're actually asking like 50 different versions of that problem to 150 different students. So almost nobody has exactly the same problem, but the auto grader, the answers are changing along with the questions, but it's all really the same question. So you can use technology for quantitative exams to get around this kind of, well, someone can take the exam early, because that would be, then they give the answers to the other person and then those answers aren't right. Or if they go to the trouble to learn how to do every problem so that they can do it even for different numbers, they've actually learned the material. So I think that the way you can think about it is For the really quantitative questions, there's a way around it by using technology to beat it. And then for less quantitative things, the more personalized and less quantitative it gets, the harder it is to cheat without being caught. At least that's one way to think about it. Sorry.
Thank you. So do we want to turn to that last big takeaway slide? All right, so we kind of anticipated what we might be hearing from our panelists, and I think we did hear these things. That remote instruction provides an opportunity to rethink whether our assessments are well aligned with our goals for students. I definitely got that from our panelists. Keep equity issues top of mind. And I saw a lot of that both in the panelist responses and in the chat. There was a lot of attention to that. Consider how you can shift students' focus to learning, not just getting a good grade, and support them in getting there. Take care that anti-cheating efforts that affect a few don't dominate over pro-learning efforts that affect all. These are good principles. It's definitely not easy to put them into practice, but I think they're important principles. And another plug for tomorrow's workshop on creative assessment techniques. And Shauna put in the chat, another big takeaway, there is no best solution. That's right, we all are learning and being innovative together. And I want to thank our panelists and give them a round of applause for being willing to spend this time with us and tackle these tough questions. Thank you to the audience as well.
Thanks for organizing this. It's been really great.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
We know that some people might still have questions or dying to ask. We can stick around for, or at least I can stick around for a few more minutes, and in case anybody else wants to. Happy to keep the conversation going, but thanks to those of you who can.
And Shauna, do you want to share the assessments doc just one more time?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Which includes practices for monitoring, if you would like. There's the assessments doc to give you more ideas. Share your ideas with us, and we will adapt the assessments doc.
Thank you. I have to go.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Al, Muriel, Rick.
Muriel and Rick.
Thank you. I see that Jesse has his hand raised, so.
Sure, yeah, I just had a question about how, I'm sorry, how best to go over the exam with students after it's done. So as a psychologist who studies memory, I know that the testing is not just an assessment, it's sort of an effective way to bolster learning, especially if you get feedback. And I feel really guilty that on many of the exams I give for large courses, I don't get to go over it with every student. Some students come to office hours with myself or the TA, and then we go through the questions they got wrong, and we offer that service. But because we're not posting the exams and the correct answers, a lot of students don't bother to figure out what they got wrong and learn from it. It's just a missed opportunity. I'm just wondering how people handle that aspect. I know I could post the exam and then rewrite it the next year, and I wish I had the time to do that, but I like to sort of keep the exams as closely held as possible.
I see raised hands in the participant window. Are some of those to respond to Jesse? If they are.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rana.
Rana, go ahead.
So I haven't done this yet, but one of the things that someone has recommended is that you record a video going through the most common error on the question or on all the questions. Basically do a review of the exam, record it, post it, and make it available for everyone. And then that way people can have an opportunity to go back and look at your review and see, like, where did I go wrong on this question?
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
It's just one possibility. I don't know if it's very effective in terms of the learning paradigm, just because the student themselves isn't able to identify the error, and that kind of goes a little bit further than just someone else telling them, here's where you made a mistake. But something might be better than nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unless someone else is going to talk about exam wrappers, I just wanted to mention them in case. Jesse, have you heard of those? They might not quite work, or you might be able to adapt them, but an exam wrapper is when you do get back your exam, it's like a series of questions that asks you where you lost points and how you studied, and then have you yourself think about how you want to adjust your studying and what skills you need to build for the next exam. So it's very metacognitive. If you're not releasing the exam, it might be a little bit more complicated, but if you can ask them about their study skills going into the exam somehow and where they think they might have, I don't know, somehow like what they felt like they lost points on, and then how to study for that better. It's hard.
I see
that works well for a midterm, but maybe for a final, I don't know how many students would do it.
Graciela has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry.
Graciela,
I have a question though, so if you have an answer, please go ahead.
Oh no,
I was going to say.
Post an example exam wrapper.
If you have an answer, please go ahead. I'll keep my question.
Sure. The exam wrapper's on the assessment stack, page 2.
Yeah. So my question is about the best practices for the 3-hour exam. So I have the course I will teach has 50 students. So it's a relatively manageable amount of students. I already sent a Google form and more than half already answered about every sort of difficulties that they may encounter. And so I know who will have what and family and things like that. But so knowing your students goes a long way. But I would like to have 2 50 or 45 minutes midterm exams and a 3-hour exam. So I thought to do it via Zoom because sometimes the students need to ask clarification on the questions, and I always answer clarifications of the questions. Everybody can. So they can use the chat for that, and we can have exchanges, right? Clarification of the questions. They may ask different things. So I would like to be connected all the time with the students because of this reason. So what is the best practice if it is not just having the chat? Is it allowing them to show themselves or not to show themselves? It is asking everybody to show themselves. What's the best practice for a 3-hour exam?
I can speak to what I did in spring and reflecting on what I might change for the future. I did have my exams over Zoom. I requested that students have their cameras on and be muted. When students had technical difficulties, and some of them did, I was completely, forgiving about that, and even would give them a little extra time if they were offline for a bit. For the 2 students who, or maybe it was more than that, for the small number of students who were in different time zones, I won't go into the details, but for the final, I allowed them to take it at a later time. So it's possible that they could have gotten a hold of the exam and benefited from that, but I figured at least the rest of the class wouldn't suffer from that. I thought it went fine, but reflecting on it, I couldn't really tell if students and the exam was completely open book, so they could access anything on the internet they wanted to, except they were not supposed to speak to another human being or communicate with another human being.
I thought that as a deterrent, it may not help, but if you say I will record, and if I have any doubt, I will look.
So that's exactly what
a deterrent, even if I would really not want to do that, but they don't know it. So it's a sort of a deterrent. It's a little bit, fear-inducing. So I'm not sure.
It's exactly what I did. Now, the questions that I have about that are, since I really couldn't tell if students were texting somebody under the table, did it matter that I had the camera on? Did it serve as a deterrent, or did they know that it really wasn't a deterrent and it didn't make any difference at all? And did it perhaps make some students feel like they were being watched and make them feel uncomfortable and affect their ability to take the exam? So that's
they are always watched. The students are always watched. I mean, when they're in a room, they're always watched.
It's a little different when you know that someone might be looking right at your face. It's not the same as being in a classroom and knowing that
that's a choice that they have. If they want to put it farther away, and show whatever, half a torso or I'm not going to micromanage the distance of the camera.
Yeah.
But I do want to add also, if you're in your home, you know, and your grandma's walking by, like that's also a different kind.
Well, I let them use a background, but I guess some computers aren't able to accommodate a background, a virtual background.
Right. So I think just thinking about all the accommodations you want to make if you're going to do this, and that there's like 5 or 10% of students that might be in situations that need these.
But I will know that beforehand, so I can address that because I asked them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jesse still has
I have another question if nobody asks, but I don't want to monopolize.
I have a question, which is, what do you do, like, if you have the mindset of, okay, I'm going to change the assessments and use a lot of lower stakes assessments, formative assessments across the course, and then have some modification to a final summative assessment. In the courses that I teach, students actually will email and say, but that's not fair. Then everyone's going to get an A. And their concern here is that they want to be able to distinguish themselves from other students of the class. And even though every step of the way we've modified the syllabus, we've modified the assessments, and we've modified all of this stuff, they are disgruntled at the fact that now it's all equitable. So how do you at least address that from an exam assessment? I mean, I feel like I want to tell these kids to take the implicit bias seminar, but how would you address that? Because we have like students that are very, very competitive, and that makes for a difficult learning environment, especially if you're going to do something like a group exam.
I saw Rick unmute himself. Did you want to say something, Rick?
Well, I just wanted to give you the right to tell them that, you know, tough. Your job is not to make every student happy with what you do. I think your job is to provide an environment where all of the students have an equitable path to mastery, and you reward those who achieve mastery. And if you happen to commit the cardinal sin of taking your entire class to mastery, I mean, that means you should get a teaching award, not that people should be upset. And if the student wants to distinguish themselves, you know, they can distinguish themselves by tutoring the other students and helping them achieve mastery. And you can write a nice letter about how they did it, you know, or if they want to do an extra honors project for you, you know, for those students, you can say, look, I have actually this special opportunity for you to do an additional project, and I'll write a nice letter about it or something. But I feel like, you know, one of the things that over the years I've learned that, you know, I can't make it my job to make every student happy. My job is to, you know, give them what they need. And then if they're happy, good. And if they're not happy, it's okay.
Exactly. I like those different strategies. Thanks.
All right. Well, I have
I was
another.
going to say something snarky, like you are distinguishing yourself right now.
Well, and that's like, it's tempting to want to write that back, but I do like the example, as Rick said, is, well, if you want to distinguish yourself in a different way, this is what you can do, right? Yeah, so that's actually a really nice way to phrase it. Yeah,
I agree. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think so much of it is about the letter of recommendation that they're hoping to get when they get their A+. And so the suggestions that you had, Rick, about them getting to do sort of extra things above and beyond, I'm going to try to use that.
Well, I am going to need to go. I have something at 4:15. Again, thank you to the panelists and the audience and these, you know, last people hanging on to get the last word on everything. I appreciate all your enthusiasm